This video I will discuss a solution that's going to be created for Bits and Bytes, which will enable line of business users in departments such as sales, HR and finance to get answers to business questions from their corporate assets that they will express using simple sentences expressed in their business terms. So the problem we're solving is as follows. The company has already invested in creating a collection of curated reports and dashboards which users have access to, and they've also provided a solution where users can do their own ad hoc content creation, such as building a dashboard. Various users in the different departments have expressed to their leadership that they struggle to find existing reports and dashboards that would be appropriate to answer the questions that they have at that point in time, and they have struggled to use the tools to create new content themselves, irrespective of the onboarding training that they've received from their internal teams. Quite a few of them have said they lack the confidence to self-service. Many of them said they've tried, they're confused by the interface, they struggle, and so forth, and view it as it's taking far too long in general. The central reporting team on the other side are looking at it as they're being continually asked lots of questions. They've got a backlog they're trying to clear, that it's just more work, and they would like those distractions to be reduced or just go away. And essentially some of the users have said, look, we don't trust ourselves and so forth. So really ultimately what some of them have been doing is figuring out how to export data from one of these assets that's already been created, and then basically copying and pasting it or importing that exported data into Excel and working from there. So they've sort of lost faith in their ability to use those other tools that the company's licensed and so forth. So as conveyed, we understood that's the concern. So we sat down with the different departments and we said, look, write out common questions that you might want to ask of the system once it's created for you, and we asked them then to try and use the ad hoc interfaces that they have access to today and see if they could tackle those questions, and many of them we observed couldn't. They were unsuccessful. Once they were stalled, they didn't know what to do, and so forth. So it was pretty evident from those use cases that what the problem that they needed solving was, let me type in my question in plain language, use terms of reference that we use every day, skip the whole dashboard kind of thing, let's get answers that we want straight away. They also said they wanted the system as best it could to infer as to what an appropriate visualization would be to represent the data that they've retrieved. So they would look to have the solution do as much of the heavy lift, not just accessing the data and computing additional bits of information, but equally to present it as best it could to sort of remove the burden upon them of doing steps that weren't necessary. So as already described, current state is when they need to go off and create something new, they struggle or fail more often than not. Example of a trigger could be they're in a meeting and they're looking at the utilization of the buildings that they lease, for example, and they notice perhaps in the meeting that the occupancy rate of particular buildings or floors seems to have dropped, and they sort of turn around and say, okay, why did occupancy drop year over year in the southern region? And they would like to ask the question along those lines of the system. So the future state would be that they could type the question in, and if the system understood what they're asking for, go off and answer the question. So as you can see here, really they're asking what the key drivers were that drives the occupancy value they're looking at. They haven't said which ones, because they don't actually know. They used an abbreviation, YOY, for year over year, and they used a bit of ambiguity. Southern region, did they mean Spain, the states of the United States that are considered southern region, or sales territory? So the system as applicable would have to react and say, I'm not sure I understand your question. So as you can see here, We're proposing that for users who come in, let's say first time, second time, if they're unsure what to do, the system will offer a set of questions that align with the area of the business they work within. These questions could have been armed by knowledge SMEs in their department. It could be by analyzing the data and the assets they have access to and auto-generating them, and it equally could be common questions that other people, other users of the system are already in there today, are frequently typing in and using, and so forth. As I mentioned earlier, the goal will also be that there's a conversational experience to sort of make cosmetic adjustments to the information as it's presented, and as I mentioned here, to allow the system to have a dialogue with the user when it believes it doesn't understand what they're getting at, or it doesn't think it has access to the right assets to answer those questions, and so forth. From a user experience perspective, it'll be a panel which includes an area into which they could freehand type or copy paste sentences. Some have said, could they speak their intent? The answer will be yes, that's a part of the vision. So voice to text. The response from the system could include, as I mentioned earlier, a visual representation of data, pie chart, scatter chart, and so forth. If they said, how did we get here? Where did that information come from, and so forth? There would be a button to ask the system to explain its thinking, its reasoning. It would respond in kind. It knows it's talking to a business user, so it would speak in those terms. If it was a technical user, it would understand that they're a technical person and perhaps use terminology and provide details that are meaningful to them, but a business user wouldn't understand. We will provide for the users to provide active feedback. The thinking here will be more along the lines of them being able to type in a sentence, because if we just record thumbs down, why? So we believe that them typing in their reasoning is what we want. We can do sentiment analysis, and it's not always going to be negative feedback. They may be wanting to make suggestions as to additional assets they foresee they might need down the road, and so forth. As far as the uncertainty situation, the system will provide the means for the system to say why it's uncertain and why it won't proceed. And as I mentioned earlier, the expectation is that more often than not, the system will try and explain to the user that it needs them to revisit their question and try again. We have to make sure everything honors the security rules that are already in place within the systems of record the system will access. This application will not bypass the role-based security and whatever adherence to standards that is baked in there. The assets that the system, like the semantic layer it will use and so forth, they can be secured. So based on who you are and the role you fulfill, it'll control which assets it will look at and consider in response to the questions you're asking. We'll have to deal with the scenarios like people in payroll or HR. We don't want someone to be able to figure out something like the particular salary that someone is getting. So for example, a silly question perhaps, what's the budget for salary in this department for this year? Presents a number. Who works in the department? And there's one employee, Fred. Well, now we know what Fred's salary is, or we can infer it from the prior answer. So we need to make sure that we don't get into those sort of situations. I've touched on entitlement. It's an LLM engine, so there'll have to be safeguards built in there to make sure that it doesn't leak information that it shouldn't, right? It doesn't go and expose something in a cache that it shouldn't, and so forth. In terms of how the system behaves, I've touched on some things already. Accountability will be important, so an appropriate level of logging will be in place to record who asked for what when, and this could be used to not just analyze the behavior, but also to respond to any technical audit requirements we have to fulfill. And as far as other aspects of the system, the user could start a conversation, pause it, go home for the day, come back the following day. They want to resume it. Now the system will try and present a visualization or whatever that was there when the conversation paused. But we also then at that point need to make sure the user understands that the data they are looking at, that reflects the conversation timestamp as it was, so that if they start to ask additional questions and then go, the data looks quite different, that they could understand that the data they were looking at from yesterday may well have changed subsequently, so that snapshot they're looking at is not the data as they would see it today, and so forth. Ultimately, we know that as we go to train the data, if we're trying to train based on the semantic layer in terms of categories and labels that have already been assigned, trying to perhaps train from the types of questions that people are proposing they'll use and so forth, there's going to be some inherent bias with the way people speak in terms of reference they've used, so we'll have to go through here and make sure that we take that into our thinking as we train things. And we also need to make sure that we don't introduce data assets where there's some sort of bias to them for whatever reason that would skew the results that it might come up with. So for example, perhaps the way pay bands were derived in certain areas of the world, they've changed how they've approached things. Things are a bit more equitable from a business process, so obviously that old data, they don't want to train on it. In summary, the goal is enable self-service at scale within the company, lower the burden on the other capable people, of which there aren't many, compliant, secure, protected, trusted, auditable, and very simply put, people could be in meetings or conversations and go, let's pop that question in right now, let's see what answer we get it back quickly, and accurate answers straight away and explainable answers. Thank you for your attention.